What's up everybody, how's it going out there? So in this video I'm going to be talking about how to find studs in a wall, or how to find joists in the ceiling, and how to do it without having a stud finder. You don't need a stud finder, they're a waste of money. But this is how I do it. When I was a building contractor, this is how I did it. This is probably some of the easiest and best ways to do it. Okay, and what happens here is also true about joists in a ceiling, okay, or a floor for that matter. So first things first, let's go ahead and look at this tape measure, okay? Because if we get a tape measure, we have our dumb end here. But if we cruise over and we look at 16, you're going to see that the 16's got a marking and it's also red. If we come up here to another 16, we're going to see 32. It's got the same marking and it's red. Okay, same thing with 4 feet. This is basically every 16 inches. Okay, and generally in walls it's every 16 inches, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they're a little bit further apart, sometimes they're a little bit closer together. Okay, sometimes they're not evenly spaced. It just depends on who built the wall and what types of things somebody was trying to avoid that's in the wall. When it comes to ceiling joists or floor joists, because if you have a 2-story, you're going to be dealing with things that are generally 2 foot apart if it's a ceiling with nothing above it, where it's just a normal ceiling, you know, then after that's a roof. Generally going to be dealing about 2 foot. But if we're dealing with something that there's a floor above it, you know, it could be 12 inches on center, it could be 16, it could be all sorts of stuff. If there's beams, depending on who engineered it, I mean, you're going to find that there's going to be different spans, but you can generally count on either 16 on center or 24 on center for a ceiling, okay? First, let me show you the problem with the tape measure, using the tape measure. Let's say that I'm gonna, hey, I just watched a YouTube video and I know everything's 16 on center. So if I come over here and I grab my tape measure and I come over this way, well, 16 lands right here, so there should be a stud. It also makes perfect sense because right here we have a electrical box, right? We've got one for our switches, okay? So that would make sense. So I'd say, okay, so mark here 16, mark here 32, mark here 4 foot, okay? So that's where my studs are. What if I went to this other side of the wall, okay? And then I butt that and I come over here. Well, 64 inches lands right here. So that would look like if I pulled from this side, I'm dealing with the same thing. It would be really close to the other layout, okay? So you start marking, you start popping holes, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Why is that? Okay, that's because there's a problem with tape measures if you don't understand how they build homes, how they frame walls, okay? When they frame a wall, they generally will do 16 on center, but that's not always the case. It's not always the case. Sometimes they can't put everything exactly on 16 on center, so sometimes there might be some plumbing that's coming up, so they have to put the stud on the side of it or something, okay? Sometimes there's a post, or who knows? There's just a bunch of different reasons why it's not always 16 on center. Sometimes the person that was doing the layout wasn't paying attention, okay? And as long as it breaks on that 4 foot, then who cares, right? Because most inspectors don't go through looking and measuring every stud. So you can't always count on that. Generally, it's pretty close, but it's not always the case. And there's also the problem of when a lot of times, and especially in tract homes, they'll build a wall and the stud that they use has a bow in it. So it'll go kind of like this, right? So they frame it and they just nail everything up. They don't care. And then so the stud in the wall, it's not straight up and down, it's doing something like this, okay? That creates a problem. The tape measure can't pick that up. Now in this case, on this particular wall, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I usually find it. And the way that I usually find it is by knocking. And you're going to notice, let me move this camera closer. So on this edge, because I know how they build walls, okay, there's always going to be something here because this is where one wall attaches to another wall, okay? So I know this is going to have a certain sound. It's going to be like a drum though. We're going to hear a difference in sound, okay? And then we should hear when the next stud shows up. So I'm just going to tap it with my knuckle, okay, and listen. Sounds the same here as it does here. Let's try this again. it sounds pretty much the same. When we start getting over here, it starts changing. But listen to what happens when I get on this side of it. Okay, because the stud is here. It's not here. But if you use the tape measure, you would assume that it's here. Okay, it's on this side. Why is it on this side? Because of the way that they built this wall. This wall over here on this side came up first. They raised that wall first. This wall ties into this wall. So what we have is we have our 3.5 inches here, plus we have our 1/2 inch or 5/8 drywall, depending on whatever they used. Okay, sometimes they double it up, right? If it's going to be used like a firewall or something, but we end up having our 1/2 inch plus a little bit more on the edge because we do have a piece of corner bead here. Then we have our 3.5 inches because that's the thickness of our wall. But this also could be a 2x6 wall. It could be a 2x8. We don't know. I mean, I know it's 2x4, but you can't always assume it's 2x4 either. And if it's an older home, it's literally going to be 4 inches. It's not going to be 3.5. Okay, but it depends. This video is more about new homes. It's not about old homes or plastered walls. This is like drywall and stuff I'm talking about. But we have our 3.5 inches, and after that, this is when this wall, they would raise it, and then they would nail it into that. So basically, if we end up coming over and we take our 4 inches, okay, so we just come over here and we go 4 inches, we got 4.5, we're going to give ourselves a little bit more, and then if I put this here and I bring it over, you're going to see that the 16 lands right about there. Okay, so that's what's going on. They raised this portion of the wall up first. I'm sorry, they raised this wall first, and then afterwards they did this. So my layout should start from here. It should not start from here. Okay, that's the danger of using a tape. And what I'm showing you here holds true also with ceiling joists, right, or floor joists. It's the same thing. It all depends on the direction of the layout and how they built it. This is the problem with using a tape. There's too many people that always say, just do 16 on center, just do 16 on center. You can't do that all the time, okay? Not unless you know how they build a home. There's always going to be something right on the corner. There's always going to be something right on the corner. Sometimes it's just a 2x4 that goes from here to this way, and we have our 1.5 inches right there. Sometimes it's that way. Usually isn't, but sometimes it is. Usually they end up having what here in California we call California corners, which is 2 pieces that have been nailed together, or it might be a channel or something. But there's always going to be something here on the end. Okay, so we know that there's something that's going to be here. When you end up seeing a light switch like this, or you end up seeing an outlet, okay, there's going to be something, generally, unless they use a tiger box, but most of the time that's not the case. But generally, there's going to be a stud on this side, or there's going to be a stud on this side. And then this is going to be true for outlets, and it's also going to be true for any type of electrical box that's going to be like this. Okay. Another thing that we can do, and you can't see it, let me move it down, let me move this down, is when we see vents like this, there's going to be a stud or something that's on this side of the vent, right? There's going to be something like that, so that way that these things can attach to something. There's going to be studs always next to a door. There's generally 2. They have what's known as a trimmer, and the trimmer sits here and it supports the header. And then next to that you have a king stud, okay? And then so we end up having 3 inches. Sometimes there's even more than that, okay? But generally you're going to end up having at least 3 inches of something to nail to right around both sides of the door. Right above the door, you're going to end up having a header. And a header can be anywhere from a 4x4 to 4x16. It just depends on what's above it and how big the door is, what kind of load it's trying to carry. But for something like this, because this is a 2-story, I know that there's going to be something here, probably up to about here, okay? Something that I can nail to. This is also true for windows, because windows and doors are framed the exact same way. The only difference is the window has a sill, and that's pretty much that. So we know that on the outside of walls there's going to be something. We know next to doors there's going to be something. Next to windows, we know above windows and above doors there's going to be something. On inside corners there's going to be something here as well. Okay, so we know that. So we're doing pretty good. We know that there's also going to be a stud next to an outlet or next to a light switch. Anywhere that the box is, there's going to be something there. We know that there's going to be a stud that's next to openings, generally, okay, generally. We know that there's going to be something there, okay? So we can use clues like this to help us locate these studs and maybe start pulling our layout from that position. So we have like a really, really long wall, okay? So let's say I have a really, really, really long wall. This is 90 feet or something. And I'm trying to find a spot right over here to hang a picture or to hang something. Instead of trying to pull layout from over there, I can undo this, take this off, and I can see which side is the stud. Okay, I just have to take the plate off and I can see which side the stud's on. From there I can sit there and say, okay, let's start doing our 16, and then that will give us a rough idea of where the next one is over in this vicinity. Okay, as long as you're doing 16 on center, just depending on how old the house is, where it's built, and all this other stuff. Okay, so you can use these as references. What I generally do, okay, to find a stud is I either use a hammer or I use my knuckles. Try using a knife, okay? Do you hear the difference? Right there. And then that's how I can find a stud, okay? But let's say you want to have another method. Let's say we get close to a stud and we think we have found it. How do we know for sure? When they attach drywall, they either use a drywall screw or they're going to use a nail, okay? If this is plaster, on the other hand, and you do this, you're going to get different sounds sometimes, okay? Because the way that, if it's an older house, okay? But this is with drywall. This is dealing with, the stuff I'm showing you is with a lot of, is pretty much newer homes. You know, it's not older homes. Older homes, you're going to be dealing with a different monster, okay? But generally, you're going to have nails, or you're going to end up having screws that are holding the drywall in place. So we know that somewhere over here is a stud, but how do we know exactly where? Well, I've got a magnet here, okay? And as long as, there we go, right there. Okay, that's where my stud is, because it has found either one of the nails or it has found one of the screws. Okay, so this tells me we've got a stud there. This also confirms that it isn't here, it's here. If I come over here and I look for one, there's nothing going on over here. Okay, but right there is. And the location of these screws, depending on where the house is made and everything like that, you're probably going to end up finding 10 inches to 16 inches or something like that, maybe 8 inches. On a ceiling, they're going to be much closer together because they have to support more weight. But on a wall, anywhere from 8 to 16 inches, you're going to find these things spaced. So by taking this, there's something that's right here. There's something that's right there. These are about 8 inches on center, okay? And then so you don't have to move around too much. Let's say we're over here and we need to find a stud, and we don't want to knock. Same there. Whoa. Same thing. Okay, grab it, and then I'm just going to start moving this until it grabs. There we go. Here's our stud, okay? Cheap, super cheap stud finder. It's just a magnet. You can get these at Home Depot and get 3 of them for like $3 or something like that. Boom, that's a 16. Now, after you have found the location of the stud or the vicinity of the stud, okay, where you're only within maybe a 1/4 inch, we have to find center. Use the finest nail you can find, a nice thin finishing nail. And from there, take your best guess and pop it where you want to hang whatever you're planning on hanging. But you want to use the finest and the smallest one first. Wait till it hits and it grabs. As soon as you know you've got something there, you can go ahead and pull it out. Or what you can do is you can pop it in a little bit, hook your tape measure up to that, and then pull your layout. on either direction, and that gives you a good idea where the rest of them are going to end up. Okay, but use the small ones. Don't use screws, and don't use big ass 16s or anything like that. Just use a very fine nail. But anyway, guys, that's going to be my video. This is my helpful video on how to find studs and also how to find joists or beams. When it comes to a ceiling, see, on a wall, it's easy to figure out because we know that the beams, not the beams, but we know that these studs are going vertical. Okay, we know that they're going to be going vertical. On a ceiling, they're going to be going horizontally, but what direction? Is it going to be going this way, or are they going to be going this way? And a lot of times we can tell what direction they're going if we stand at an angle and we look up at the ceiling. Because if we stand at an angle and look at the ceiling, what you'll see a lot of times is a sheet of drywall. You can see where they've taped it, and then there's another sheet of drywall, and you'll see where they taped it, and there's another sheet. Okay, and whatever the length is, the long ways, because like for instance, this area right here, I see that I can see it here, and I can see it here where it's been taped. And because I see it basically going like this, I know that the joists are going this way because of those seams on the drywall. Okay, so there's a lot of clues. There's a lot of clues on you know, where these things are. There's a lot of clues. You just got to look for them and kind of be aware of them. And that's kind of the whole point of this video, is just trying to get you where, you know, you're not afraid to find studs in walls anymore, or up in a ceiling if you're going to be hanging a plant or something. You're not afraid of that anymore because now you understand. It's like, hey, I can do it with a tape measure. I kind of get it, even though the tape measure can be misleading. And it's a big mistake for people that really don't know what they're doing. Okay, so there's that. We know that we can use clues by just saying, well, I know there's something that's going to be on one side or the other here. We got something that's over here. You know, looking at doors and windows, we know things like that. Things are not always 16 on center. Sometimes there's variances. Sometimes you're going to end up having a piece of plywood behind something like this. That's going to make the whole knocking thing a lot harder because it's going to sound the same. But there's tons of clues. It's real easy. You shouldn't be afraid of doing it. But there is one thing I have to stress, and that is they run plumbing and they run wires next to things in walls. Sometimes it's in the middle and it's not stapled off or something. It's not attached to a stud. Okay? So before you start pounding a bunch of damn nails into a wall thinking that you found something, you need to make sure, okay? You don't have to worry about the magnet being attracted to copper, okay? Because it's not going to stick to copper. But they have what's known as a nail plate, okay? And a nail plate is supposed to protect things like electrical wires that are running through it. Or it's supposed to protect plumbing that's going through it. So if you end up having your magnet and you set it somewhere like here and you start moving it and it's wanting to stick in a fairly large area, not just like where one little nail is, it's a dead giveaway that there is a strike plate. There's a nail plate there. And if you try to nail something through there, it's going to bend. Okay? But if the maniac that built the house did not put one of those nail plates up, and then you pop your nail in it, you could be going right through a piece of copper, or you could be going into some electrical wiring. Okay? So make sure that when you find that stud, you're hitting wood and you're not skimming the outside of it. Okay? That's another danger of just trying to find the location of the stud just keep popping holes until you find something. Right? That's one of the dangers of it, because if you can't control that nail just right to make sure, you know, after it goes through a certain distance, you can stop it and pull it out, and you just keep, you know, hitting it crazy, you can hit stuff like that. So just keep that in mind, because a lot of times next to a stud there's going to be wiring, especially on something like this, because we know that the stud is here. This wiring could be going straight up on this side of the stud, but it could be also drilled through and cruising this direction. Who knows? It just depends on who built the house. Could be going this way, right? It's hard to say. Could be even going downward. So that's my tips. Hopefully you learn something from it, because it's really not hard. But people have problems with this all the time. But it's really not hard. Anyway, guys, that's that. And I'll have more tips like this in the future, so make sure you subscribe and make sure you like the video and all that other good stuff. You know, the stuff that you always hear, like from people on YouTube, right? So that's that. Anyway, guys, till next time, I'll talk to you later.